So I want you to picture a scenario for a minute. It's Sunday morning.
Okay.
You're sitting in a pew, maybe one of those, comfy theater seats, surrounded by hundreds of other people. The lighting's perfect. The sound is concert
The
quality.
standard weekend routine for millions of people.
Exactly. And you listen to a sermon, maybe it's a really good one, engaging, 3 points in a poem. You sing a few songs, then you go home.
Right.
And you do this for 10, 20, maybe 30 years. I mean, if you do the math, you've heard literally thousands of hours of instruction. You've got notebooks full of those fill-in-the-blank sermon outlines. But deep down, you feel, well, disconnected.
Hmm.
You feel like you know all the information, but you don't actually know the reality of it. It's like you have the map, but you've never actually walked the terrain.
It's the paradox of the modern believer, isn't it?
Mm.
You have all the data, but do you have the life? And I think more importantly, in a room packed with people, why do you still feel so alone?
That right there is the question we are tackling today. We are doing a deep dive into this fascinating and honestly pretty challenging piece of writing called The Relational Foundation, a guide to biblical discipleship.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, when I first picked it up, I thought it was going to be, a manual for how to run a small group.
Bring the snacks, ask 3 icebreaker questions, go home.
Right. And it is definitely not that.
Not at all. In fact, if you
Yeah.
read it that way, you miss the entire point.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty intense diagnosis of a condition the source calls spiritual orphanhood.
Yeah.
It basically argues that we've substituted all these institutional structures, programs, services, lectures for the actual relational foundation the faith was built on.
It's a heavy diagnosis.
Yeah.
The central argument is that we're facing a crisis of connection. We've built these really efficient systems for delivering information, but we've lost the ecosystem for actually growing people.
And the result isn't just loneliness.
No, it's a complete lack of spiritual authority.
So we have a lot to unpack here. We're going to look at this idea of relational chaos, which sounds a bit like my family reunion, but it's much deeper.
A lot deeper.
We're going to break down the 4 levels of discipleship the source outlines, and we're going to look at some math that, well, it frankly blew my mind on how this actually scales. But let's start with the problem itself. Spiritual orphanhood.
It's a striking term, isn't it?
It really is. And the text starts by saying we are living in relationally chaotic times, which, I mean, you look at the world, social media, isolation, breakdown of community, that feels pretty accurate.
It does.
Yeah.
But the source insists this isn't just a world problem, it's inside the church.
And that's the key distinction. We often think of the church as the refuge from all the chaos.
But the source argues the chaos has actually infiltrated the pews. It defines spiritual orphanhood not as a lack of parents necessarily, but as a total disconnect between your theology and your experience.
So like a head versus heart thing.
Even deeper, it's head versus reality. You can have a person with perfect head knowledge. They can ace the theology exam. They can look you right in the eye and say, God is my father.
They know the password to get into the club.
Precisely. They know the vocabulary perfectly, but experientially, they live like orphans. They live with anxiety, a lack of identity, this sense that they have to perform to earn their keep. The source argues they lack that experiential understanding of sonship, of their marriage to Christ, of their inheritance.
That's a powerful distinction. It's like the difference between reading a biography of a great father and actually being raised by him. One is just data, the other is development.
Exactly.
I can read about how a father protects his kids, but until I actually feel safe in his house, I'm just studying a concept.
That's it. And the source argues that this is maybe the #1 issue of our day.
Number one, I mean, that's a bold claim given everything else going on in the world. Politics, the economy, wars.
It is bold, but just follow the logic for a second. If the internal foundation of a person is cracked, if they don't know who they belong to, then they have no stability. And if you don't have stability, you have zero spiritual authority to confront the chaos happening outside in the world.
You can't export peace if you don't possess it.
You can't. It's like trying to build a skyscraper on a sinkhole. You can build it high, you can paint it gold, but the minute the wind blows.
The structural integrity fails because the foundation is hollow.
And the source points out that we've tried to paper over this crack with language, We use all these corporate terms to describe spiritual things. We talk about church management, executive pastors, membership drives.
Yes, this part really stood out to me, the analysis of the biblical vocabulary. I hadn't really thought about it, but the Bible is just obsessed with family terms.
It's almost entirely relational vocabulary. Father, son, bride, children, adoption, inheritance. You just don't see God using corporate terms. He doesn't talk about management or staff or CEOs.
Our membership tiers, gold-level believers get preferred seating.
Right, that's just not in the text. He talks about family. But the critique here is that our modern religious experience often feels much more like a corporation. We have services provided by professionals for consumers.
Which leads right into the most stinging critique in this entire piece. The way we try to fix this orphan problem is by giving people more information. We think if we just explain fatherhood better, they'll finally get it.
The 2 talks a week fallacy.
Oh, I laughed out loud at this part because it is so painfully accurate to the Western model.
It cuts deep.
Mm.
The source tells this anecdote about a pastor who was frustrated with his congregation. He felt they were immature, stagnant, just not growing up.
Just complaining that he had a church full of spiritual infants who needed constant attention.
So he's venting, why won't these people grow up? And someone asks him, well, what's your discipleship model? How are you raising them?
And the pastor basically describes his weekly sermons. Well, I preach a solid message on Sunday morning, and we have a Wednesday night teaching service.
And here comes the zinger.
It's the perfect question. The person asks him, would you raise your own children by giving them 2 general talks per week?
It just puts it all in perspective immediately, doesn't it?
It's absurd when you apply it to a biological family. I imagine I sit my kids down on the couch at 10 a.m. on Sunday. I give them a 40-minute speech, maybe with some PowerPoint slides,
Right.
about how to be a responsible human, how to tie their shoes, how to treat their neighbors. And then I just ignore them for the rest of the week and expect them to turn out okay.
You'd be arrested for neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, the source argues this is the default setting for most of our churches. We rely on the lecture to do the heavy lifting of raising spiritual children.
And we assume that if the speech is good enough, the listeners will just magically mature.
But the source says this isn't just bad strategy, it's actually unbiblical. There's that specific verse they mentioned, 1 Corinthians 4.15.
Though you have 10,000 instructors, you do not have many fathers. I want to pause on that for a second. The distinction between an instructor and a father, that feels like the hinge of this entire deep dive.
It is the pivot point. I mean, think about the goal of an instructor. An instructor's job is to transfer information.
Right.
They want you to know the material, pass the test, and maybe to apply the skill. It's transactional.
My old professor doesn't lose sleep over whether I'm a good person or if my marriage is failing as long as I pass the midterm.
Exactly. But a father or a mother, that's transformational. A father transfers life. A father doesn't just want you to know what he knows. He wants you to become who he is and then go even further.
An instructor builds a student. A father builds a legacy.
And that's the shift the source is calling for. From an information-based faith to a relationship-based faith.
Okay, so let's get practical, because I think most people listening would be nodding along saying, yes, I want deep relationships, I don't just want a lecture. But how do you actually do that?
Well, the source provides a framework, the 4 levels of discipleship.
And this framework is incredibly useful, I think, for self-diagnosis. It helps you see where you actually fall on the spectrum.
For sure.
So level 1.
Level 1 is unaccountable believers.
Ah, the spiritual lone rangers.
Exactly. These are people who claim Christianity. Maybe they identify with it culturally or intellectually, but they have 0 connection, 0 correction, and 0 encouragement from other believers. They're flying solo.
And in an age of podcasts and YouTube sermons, this group is huge and it's growing. You can consume the best content in the world without ever having to talk to another human being.
It feels safe, but the source argues it's really dangerous. It leaves you completely vulnerable. There's no one to watch your blind spots. You become an echo chamber of one.
Okay, then we move to level 2, institutional participation. The source says this is where the vast majority of people sit.
These are the churchgoers. They attend the services, they listen to the sermons, maybe they even go to a Sunday school class. And the source is careful here. It said this is helpful. It's better than level 1, but it is not enough.
Why not? I mean, if I'm showing up, isn't that the point?
Because of anonymity. You can sit in a room with 500 people and still be relationally invisible. You're consuming content alongside others, but you aren't being fathered. You aren't being known. You can hide in a crowd.
It's the difference between being in a crowded movie theater and being at a dinner table. In the theater, we're all looking at the screen. At the table, we're looking at each other.
Precisely. Which brings us to level 3, mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're crossing the bridge.
Okay.
Mentoring is a personal investment by a more mature believer. It's usually one-on-one or in a very small group. There's specific guidance happening.
This feels like where most people think the peak is. I need to get a mentor.
And mentoring is great.
Yeah.
It's coaching. Here's how you handle your finances, or here's how you study this book.
Right.
But the source argues even this falls short of the biblical ideal.
How so?
It's still often skill-focused or time-bound. I'll mentor you for 6 months. It's like a contract.
So what is level 4? Because if mentoring isn't the top, what is?
Level 4 is parenting or fathering. This is the most committed form. The source describes this as lifelong and legacy-focused. It uses examples like Paul with Timothy or Elijah with Elisha.
Wow, okay. That sounds intense.
It is intense. This isn't, let me give you some advice over coffee. This is, I'm going to walk with you until you are ready to do what I do.
It implies a level of vulnerability and access most of us just aren't used to.
Right. A father shares his life, not just his knowledge. He lets you see his failures, his prayer life, his checking account.
It's terrifying for a lot of people. It's the difference between babysitting and parenting. One you get paid for and you go home. The other is a permanent alteration of your life.
But the source insists this is the only way to cure that spiritual orphanhood we started with. You can't cure orphanhood with a class?
You can only cure it with a family. You need access to a life, not just a library.
Now, I have to be devil's advocate for a second, because sometimes when people hear relational discipleship, they interpret it as, okay, we just hang out, eat pizza, talk about our feelings, and ignore theology. Right, and the source was very clear about that.
Very clear.
And this is crucial. The source lists 9 core doctrines. I mean, the heavy hitters like the deity of Christ, the Trinity, the resurrection. It explicitly states, our goal is not to replace these truths, but to bring a deeper understanding and application of them.
So it's not relationship instead of truth.
No, it's truth transferred through relationship. The argument is that truth is actually learned better when you see it lived out in a father or mother than when you just hear it from a lecturer.
You learn patience by watching a patient person, not just defining the word.
Exactly.
Which brings up a really interesting point about who this is for. There's a section on breaking myths that I found, well, really refreshing. We have this idea that you have to be super holy or saved for a long time.
Or have your life perfectly together before you could be discipled.
Right, and the source just flips that upside down. It argues that discipleship can and often should start before someone is even born again.
Wait, so you're saying you disciple someone who isn't a Christian yet?
According to the source, yes. I mean, look at how Jesus did it. He invited the disciples to follow him long before they fully understood who he was.
That's true.
They were learning his ways before they even understood his nature. Peter was walking with Jesus for a long time before he had that "you are the Christ" moment.
Exactly. The source distinguishes between being born of the Spirit, which is a spiritual event, and the process of learning the ways of God. You can start teaching someone the family culture before they are officially adopted.
And that relationship is often the very bridge that leads them to that decision.
That changes the whole dynamic, doesn't it? It stops being, get your act together, memorize the rules, and then we'll talk about mentoring you.
Yeah, it becomes, let me just walk with you, let me show you what this life looks like, and somewhere in that process, you'll meet the Father.
It makes the entry point so much more accessible. And that leads to the setting. If you're doing that kind of deep work, walking with people who might be messy, who might not believe yet, you can't really do it in a lecture hall.
No, and the source has a strong preference here. The table versus the pew.
The table forces intimacy. You can't hide at a dinner table.
Mhm.
If you're in row 45 of a sanctuary, you can check your phone, you can zone out, you can leave without anyone knowing your name.
But at a table, you have to pass the potatoes, you have to make eye contact.
It's vulnerable. And there's something so disarming about food.
It is. The source mentions that many people have come to Christ in these settings, homes, small groups, over a meal, and they end up more deeply rooted than longtime church members. Why? Because the environment allowed for questions, for pushback, for real connection.
It's safe to be real when you're breaking bread.
Now, I'm a numbers guy. I like it when we can look at the data. And usually when we talk about relational discipleship or small groups, people think small.
They think, well, that's nice, but how do we reach the masses? We need big events for that.
But the source lays out this mathematical argument that suggests the exact opposite.
This is the power of multiplication versus addition. And it's staggering when you actually run the numbers.
Okay, so walk us through this. Because intuitively, a stadium full of people feels like more impact than a living room.
Okay, so the source posits a scenario based on the Jesus model. Let's say one person decides, I'm not going to try to preach to thousands. I'm going to focus on discipling just 12 people.
12 people. That seems manageable over a lifetime.
And they dedicate their life to that, really pouring into them, level 4 style. Now, let's say those 12 people don't just become followers, they become leaders. They become fathers and mothers, and they each go out and disciple 12 more.
So we're replicating the process.
Right. If that process reproduces just 4 times 4 generations of discipleship, you end up with over 20,000 disciples.
Hold on. 20,000 from one person starting with 12.
Yes. And if it goes one more generation 5 times, it jumps to nearly 250,000.
That is exponential growth.
It is. I mean, contrast that with a preacher who speaks to 1,000 people every Sunday. That's addition. He adds people to the room. But if he stops speaking, or if he moves away,
Or has a moral failure.
right, the growth stops. With multiplication, the growth is in the DNA of the people. It continues without the original leader.
It's the difference between building a crowd and building an army. Or a family. A crowd disperses when the show is over.
A family grows. And that's why the source calls discipleship a command, not a suggestion. It quotes Matthew 28, go and make disciples. It doesn't say go and make converts. It doesn't say go and make churchgoers.
The mathematical impossibility of reaching the world by addition forces us to look at multiplication.
You literally cannot reach the world just by holding services. You have to empower people to reproduce.
So let's recap. We have the diagnosis. We're orphans in a chaotic world, consuming information but starving for connection. We have the solution. Move from instruction to fathering level 4 discipleship.
Yep.
And we have the method. Get around a table, invest in a few, and let it multiply.
It sounds simple when you lay it out like that.
But, and there is always a but, this isn't easy. The source is very honest about the cost.
Yes. In the outro section, it explicitly calls this a wake-up call. It acknowledges that this message deeply challenges the Western church culture.
It disrupts the status quo. If I'm a leader who has built my identity on having a full room on Sunday, this message tells me my entire metric might be wrong.
Exactly. It challenges the metric of success. Are you successful because you have a crowd? Or are you successful because you have sons and daughters who can function without you?
And for the regular believer, it challenges their comfort. It's so much easier to consume a sermon than it is to disciple a person.
Oh, yeah. People are messy. They have problems. They call you late at night. They borrow your car and scratch it.
Right. The source says God is calling the brave, the hungry, and the reformers. It implies that doing this, really engaging in this, is going to feel like rocking the boat.
It reminds me of that distinction you made earlier between stacking bricks and building a foundation. You can stack bricks really high, really fast. You can build a wall in a day. But if the ground shakes, they all come tumbling down because there's no mortar. There's no connection.
And the source's whole argument is that the ground is shaking. That's the relational chaos we started with. We are living in a cultural earthquake zone.
So the question isn't just how do we grow? It's how do we survive and thrive? And the answer provided here is we return to the foundations. We return fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters.
It's a call to leave the lecture hall and get back to the dinner table.
That's the heart of it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought. It's easy to critique the system or the church at large. We can all point fingers at the professional ministers and say they should do better.
But this source ultimately points the finger back at us. It asks, are you willing to take the journey?
Right. If instruction is easy and fathering is hard, look at your own life. Look at your own small circle. Are you just exchanging information, sending links to things, talking about the news?
Or are you transferring life?
Are you acting as an instructor, or are you willing to become a father or mother in the faith? Because one builds a crowd, but the other builds a legacy.
And in a world full of orphans, a legacy of family is exactly what is needed.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.